The train was about to depart, but my fiancé, Luke, blocked our way with unwavering determination. He insisted on waiting for Susan, the girl who'd gone to the river to wash her face, acting as if she were some kind of princess. This was the last train heading to the state-run textile factory. If we missed it, we'd be stuck in the countryside for good. At the final moment, just as the train was pulling out, I clenched my teeth and called for the others to help drag Luke onto the train. That's how we managed to get in. We became proud workers at the textile factory. But Susan missed the recruitment and had to stay behind in the village, where she was forced to marry an old widower. Within 3 years, she had 2 children. During her last childbirth, she died from complications. Even after death, she was given a ghost marriage. Luke's expression was blank, unreadable. But on our wedding night, he wrapped a hemp rope around my neck. His eyes were bloodshot as he growled, "It was your cold, poisonous heart that kept Susan from getting the chance to work in the city. She suffered so much in her life. Why do you get to live so well?" When I opened my eyes again, I was back at the moment just before the train was about to leave. I saw Luke turning to glance toward the river, waiting. This time, I let go of his hand. Let him face the consequences of his own actions. "What's the rush?" he sneered. "You in such a hurry to reincarnate? I've got all the referral letters right here. If you think you're so capable, go on. Get on the train." Luke's voice was hoarse with emotion, his face twisted with grief. But without those letters, we couldn't even board the train. Hearing the argument, I stood there in a daze, the despair and terror of death still clinging to me. Under the blazing sun, a few of the young men traveling with us were shouting at Luke. Someone tried to grab the referral letters, but Luke's face distorted with rage as he held up a match. "Push me one more time, and I'll burn them all. Nobody's going anywhere." At his words, everyone's face went pale with fear. Being able to enter the city and get a factory job was like a miracle from heaven. "Luke, are you out of your mind? If you want to wait for Susan, then do it alone. Why drag the rest of us down? Yeah, give us back our letters." Even with everyone shouting at him, Luke stood firm, his eyes dark and hostile. When someone tried to get closer, he struck the match. "One more step, and we all go to hell together." Everyone froze, stunned. No one dared to make another move. "You're all so selfish," Luke hissed. "We're from the same village, some of us even related by blood, and you're just going to abandon Susan like this? Her referral letter is with me too. If we leave now, what happens to her?" Luke was the village chief's son, and he carried some weight back home. Before we left, the chief had entrusted all our letters to him, and he promised he'd take care of them. We agreed, thinking it was safer that way. Now everyone regretted that decision bitterly. Someone tugged at my arm, saying, "Lena, please talk to your fiancé. If this drags on any longer, we'll miss the train." I lowered my gaze. Since when has Luke ever listened to me? The only person he ever cared about, always and only, was Susan. My father was a martyr. The day I was born, the news of his death arrived, and the shock sent my mother into fatal hemorrhaging. I was raised by my grandfather, but after he passed, I was taken in by the village chief's family. To outsiders, it looked like an act of kindness. They saw the chief's family as honorable for taking in an orphan like me. But it wasn't until I had died once that I saw things clearly. The truth was, they took me in to secure the inheritance of a family line with no heirs. It wasn't just about my house and land. They also wanted the martyr's pension that came with my father's name. Luke's cold eyes swept over me. "What now, Lena? You gonna try and stop me too?" "No," I said. "You're right. We really shouldn't leave Susan behind." I fought hard to keep the bitterness out of my voice, but my words instantly angered the others. "Lena, can you be rational for once?" Someone snapped. "Just because he's your fiancé doesn't mean you should blindly take his side." "Yeah, if we lose this chance to work in the city, who's going to take responsibility?" "You." Their scolding only made Luke more scornful. Luke shot them a cold glance and barked. "What are you yelling about? The only reason any of you even got a chance to go work at the factory is because my dad fought for it. One more word, and none of you are going." He waved the referral letters in his hand, both proud and provocative. Then he glanced over at me, since I'd stayed quiet the whole time. "Lena's way more obedient than the rest of you. Learn from her." I let out a cold laugh but didn't say anything back. Luke was always good at making himself look important. But let's be real, those extra factory spots didn't come from his family's connections. Everyone here either came from a martyr's family or had parents who'd made major contributions to society and were struggling to get by. The only ones who got in through my dad's connections were Luke and Susan. Luke was the fiancé of a martyr's daughter, me, so, of course, the organization reserved a spot for him. As for Susan, she went around telling people she was my dad's goddaughter and even got the village chief to back her up. I didn't call her out in my past life, but this time I won't stay silent. The sun was scorching, baking the ground beneath our feet. Everything around us was hot to the touch. The sharp whistle of the train engine up ahead sounded like a death sentence. One of the guys from our village, Mike Carter, finally cracked. His dad was an old coal miner who died in a mine collapse during a rainstorm. That sacrifice was the only reason Mike got his spot at the factory. "Luke, damn it, give me my letter." Mike lunged at him, but Luke took a step back. Gritting his teeth, he suddenly struck the match. With a sharp flick, a flame danced dangerously close to the brown paper envelope. Just as everyone stared at him in shock, watching the edges of the envelope begin to blacken, Susan came running up, pants legs rolled, her pale face flushed red. She walked right past us, and even took a moment to pull out her little mirror to check her reflection. Facing the angry stares and accusations, she smiled sweetly and said, "What's the rush? The train doesn't have wings, it's not going to fly away." By now, Luke had already tucked the match back in his pocket. Like he was revealing treasure, he smugly handed over the envelope. "All right, we can go to the city together now." Mike's jaw clenched so tight you could hear his teeth grind. His fists were balled so tightly they creaked. When Susan took the envelope from Luke, she deliberately let her fingers brush against his hand and even winked at him. How had I not seen it before? Those two had been sneaking around behind my back all along, and I actually believed their whole brother and sister nonsense. The train's whistle shrieked again. Mike snatched the envelope containing the referral letters and shouted at us, "What the hell are you all standing around for? Get on the damn train!" Everyone broke into a run, desperate not to miss it. I ran after them in a half jog. As Susan passed me, hand in hand with Luke, she finally seemed to notice me. "Lena," she said, "why are you running so slow? Are you still mad at Luke? Are you holding us back on purpose?" "What would I be mad about?" I replied evenly. But luck wasn't on our side. Just as I finished speaking, the train doors slammed shut. It began to pick up speed, pulling away from the platform faster and faster, with the noise around us suddenly becoming unbearably quiet. My voice, calm and flat like dead water, broke the silence. "I haven't visited my grandpa's grave yet. Maybe it's not so bad missing this train after all." The train moved farther and farther away, and soon even the sound of the wheels on the tracks faded into silence. A few of the girls began sobbing, their hands covering their mouths to stifle the sound. Mike and the others looked furious, their expressions dark as storm clouds. Someone grabbed Luke by the collar and screamed, "You son of a bitch! You happy now? This is all because of Susan. She just had to wash her damn face. What, her skin would have fallen off if she skipped it for once?" Susan's face turned ghostly pale. She trembled and tried to hide behind Luke. I didn't mean to," she stammered. Luke turned and glared at me with hatred in his eyes. "Lena, stop being so damn passive-aggressive. No one wanted this to happen." "Passive-aggressive?" I smiled, my voice echoing across the empty platform, strangely cold. "You think I'm the one being passive-aggressive?" Mike even turned his anger on me. "Lena, your fiancé pulled this crap, and you don't think you're responsible?" "Yeah," another person chimed in. "We trusted you. That's the only reason we let Luke hold on to our referral letters." The rage burning through the group needed somewhere to go, and I understood that. I nodded. I wasn't going to fight them. Not now. Not like this. Meanwhile, a few of the guys had already landed punches on Luke. He held his ground, to his credit, not making a single sound. It wasn't until a few girls pushed Susan that Luke finally lost it. He pulled a pair of scissors out of his pocket and snarled, "Touch her again, and I swear I'll ruin all three of you." Seeing how unhinged he looked, everyone finally backed off. Susan clung to him, sobbing miserably in his arms. Luke comforted her while snapping coldly at the rest of us. What's the rush? Even if we miss the train, I've got other ways to get you all into the city. Everyone stared at him, eyes filled with shock and disbelief. Luke smirked. A few days from now, a military unit will be passing through here. We've got referral letters. The army won't turn us away. That was the moment I became completely certain Luke had been reborn too. In my previous life, there had indeed been a military unit that passed through. Susan had tried to follow them into the city, but she didn't have the necessary documents. Someone asked quietly, "How do you know my dad's the village chief?" Luke tilted his head arrogantly and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Is it weird that I know a few things? Besides, the commander of the Southern Military District is an old friend of my father's. As long as I give his name, they won't refuse us. Hope flickered in everyone's hearts. Some even started cozying up to Luke. Only Mike remained stiff-necked, his voice full of resentment. What are you so proud of? If you hadn't messed things up, we wouldn't need to beg the army. Luke gave him a cold glare. Susan pouted and spoke in a sugary tone, though there was an unmistakable threat beneath it. Mike, are you saying you don't want to go to the city? Mike choked on his words, his face flushing red with anger. I smiled cheerfully. The military's got their own mission. They might not let us tag along. Susan visibly flinched, grabbing Luke's hand instinctively. He glared at me like he wanted to tear me apart. Stop talking nonsense. No one needs your sarcasm. Then let's wait and see, I said, my smile deepening as I turned and walked back toward the village. The sun stretched my shadow long and thin behind me. In my past life, I had clung to Luke, trying to escape the countryside. I never realized that he had been using me from the very beginning. But in this life, I'll make sure they both experience what it means to be truly miserable. When I got back to the village, I happened to catch the village chief in his courtyard cursing loudly. When he saw me return, his face twisted. Lena, what are you doing back? We missed the train, I replied flatly. His expression changed instantly. He dropped his hoe and took off running toward the train station. I watched his figure disappear into the distance and let out a cold laugh. Luke and Susan wanted to make it into the city? Not in this life. The first thing I did after getting home was send a letter to the authorities requesting the cancellation of my engagement to Luke. In that letter, I laid everything out in detail. Why I was calling off the wedding, Luke and Susan's inappropriate relationship, and the truth that Susan was never my father's goddaughter, despite what they claimed. 2 days later, just one day before the military was scheduled to arrive, I got a reply. The letter clearly stated they would investigate the matter thoroughly, and if confirmed, Luke and Susan's entry permits would be revoked. I smiled with satisfaction and burned the letter. In the flickering light of the flame, my face reflected nothing but grim delight. We returned to the train station as planned. The scorching sun glinted off the tracks, so bright it hurt the eyes. Everyone paced anxiously on the platform. Susan stood beside Luke, throwing me a smug look. Lena, why are you ignoring me? Still mad at Luke? She asked sweetly. You better watch yourself. If you keep this up, Luke might not take you into the city. I stared at her coldly. She had the nerve to say that, after using my father's name to secure a spot, and now she was threatening me with it. Luke gave me a frosty look. You'd better stop playing games. If you keep this up, you can leave right now. I smirked. So arrogant. I was just curious how they'd react once they found out their permits had been revoked. Why should I leave? I said. I have my entry permit. Luke's eyes turned even colder. Susan tilted her head, playing with a strand of hair as she looked me up and down. Lena, don't upset Luke again, okay? She said softly. We women should stay soft and gentle, Susan said sweetly. After all, men are the head of the family. She deliberately leaned closer to Luke, playing the perfect picture of a meek and obedient little flower. I couldn't help but snap back. Even Chairman Mao said that women hold up half the sky. What, are you saying you don't agree with a great leader's ideals? Susan's face went instantly pale. That was a dangerous accusation and she knew it. She wouldn't dare take that on. The tension thickened. Everyone from the village was now watching like it was a show. Luke glared at me, then gently raised his hand to wipe the sweat from Susan's forehead. The intimacy of the gesture made several people turn away awkwardly. In this era, even married couples didn't display affection so openly in public. Luke locked eyes with me, his gaze full of warning. If you dare bully Susan again, I swear, once I meet the general, I'll report your factory quota and have it taken away. I laughed aloud. Wow, Luke, you've repeated that lie so many times, you actually believe it now. Before the words had even faded, a green military truck slowly rolled into view. The crowd immediately lit up, waving and shouting excitedly. Susan wasn't weak and fragile anymore either. She straightened up and ran faster than anyone. Luke hurried right behind her. I stood at the edge of the group, watching as Luke and Susan shoved past Mike and the others to get to a military officer. Comrade, we missed the train, Luke said as he pulled out a referral letter. My father and your general go way back. These are all children of martyrs. We're hoping you'll help us get to the city. He deliberately emphasized the words children of martyrs, then cast a threatening glance in my direction, clearly afraid I'd expose him. Before the officer could respond, Susan's eyes filled with tears. My father was John Liang. He died on the battlefield. We all have referral letters. Please, for the sake of my father's sacrifice, let us come with you. Her voice trembled with grief, her sorrow so sincere-looking it could fool anyone who didn't know better. The others from our village all turned to look at me. After all, in the eyes of outsiders, Susan was my father's goddaughter. Even though many of them privately disapproved of her clinginess and fakery, none of them stepped forward to call her out. Not now. John Liang was your father? The officer asked, eyes suddenly alert. Susan lowered her gaze, tears clinging to her lashes. Yet in her eyes, I caught the faint glimmer of calculation. Luke stood behind her, with his chin raised high, already acting like victory was his. Yes, Susan choked out. He was my father. I grew up hearing stories about him. I've dreamed of going to the city to visit where he's buried. No, he didn't return home. He and his fallen comrades lie forever in the martyrs' cemetery. Gasps broke out around us. A few of the soldiers even wiped tears from their eyes. Clearly, they were moved by what they saw as her deep filial devotion. The officer's expression turned solemn and respectful. He saluted her, and that's when I finally spoke. Susan, are you really John Liang's daughter? Her face turned ghost white. She clutched her referral letter tighter. Luke immediately jumped in front of her, eyes blazing. Lena, stop making a scene. What, are you jealous now? The lead officer gave Susan a confused look. Susan shot me a furious glare before finally muttering, I'm not his biological daughter, I'm his goddaughter. Luke took the chance to pull out a forged letter from the village chief. Comrade, here's a signed statement from our village leader. You can read it yourself. A few of the villagers chimed in to support them. Yes, we all knew Susan got her referral because she's a martyr's goddaughter. That's right. Please let us board. Susan has always been close to Mr. Liang's family. We all know that. But the truth was, Susan had never been close to my family. What she was close to was Luke. I wasn't surprised by the villagers' response. They didn't like Susan either, but they were all afraid that if she got into trouble, it would ruin their own chances of getting into the city. The officer frowned, then took my documents and examined them carefully. His expression shifted. Then he turned to me with a serious look and said, Comrade, please board the truck. Luke opened his mouth to snap at me again. He wasn't done, but the officer stopped them. I've never heard of John Liang having a goddaughter. Luke and Susan's faces turned ugly. They exchanged a panicked look, unable to get a single coherent word out. The officer continued, You'd better not be lying. If you are, you're looking at prison. I stood quietly among the crowd, smiling at Luke and Susan. The other villagers just looked at one another, not daring to say anything. To be honest, most of them had always doubted Susan's claim of being my father's goddaughter. Everyone in the nearby villages was at least distantly related, and no one had ever heard of Susan being connected to my family. There had been plenty of whispers behind closed doors for a while now. At that moment, I spoke again. It's true. That statement was written by the village chief. Everyone turned to me in surprise. No one expected me to speak on their behalf. Even Luke and Susan's eyes lit up with hope. I smiled. But I never said Susan is my dad's goddaughter. I only said the village chief wrote the letter. The officer, hearing that even I wouldn't confirm Susan's identity, didn't hesitate further. Still, he let Luke and Susan board the truck. The vehicle started to pull away slowly. Sitting inside, the two of them looked relieved, like they just dodged death. I watched them, my face calm, though a storm was raging in my heart. Just moments ago, I'd considered exposing them right then and there. But no, letting them off that easily would be a waste. If anything, they might still find another way into the city later. So why not let them on, bring them all the way, and personally crush their dreams? When we arrived in the city, everyone looked around with wide eyes, amazed and curious. Susan clung to Luke's hand, giddy with excitement. "Luke, this place is amazing. Luke cut her off. He'd forgotten for a second that he wasn't the well-off city worker he'd been in our last life. He had just come from the countryside. He didn't have a cent to his name. Just then, Luke glanced at me. "You should pay for her." "Why?" I looked at him, completely unimpressed. "Because if it weren't for me, you and Susan wouldn't have made it on the truck," he snapped. I raised my brows, about to respond with a cutting remark, but Mike pulled me aside. All right. We've got to get to the factory and check in. Don't waste time." The other villagers jumped in to calm things down too. Luke clenched his teeth and held his tongue. It was getting late. He didn't dare cause more trouble. Sensing the shift, Susan quickly tried to ease the tension. "It's okay, Luke. I'm fine." Her sweet tone only made Luke's heart ache more for her. He gave me a hard tug. "Watch yourself," he hissed, then stormed off with Susan in tow. As they passed me, Susan cast me a smug sideways glance. "Serves you right." At the textile factory, Susan rushed to hand in her referral letter before I could. She even leaned close to whisper in my ear, "Your dead father turned out to be quite useful. Be sure to thank him for me." I clenched my teeth. "You sure about that? Hope you don't regret it." "Regret what?" she said, then flashed her new watch in my face. "See this? Luke bought it for me." She looked over at Luke, who was speaking with the factory official. Her smile widened. "You ever wonder where your yearly compensation payments went?" "They're with me. Luke's just scared I won't have money to eat meat. He says I'm delicate and need to be pampered. You're the type who should eat husks and bark." Rage boiled inside me. Susan always wore new clothes, glowing with health, while other girls in the village were pale and thin. I'd thought her parents spoiled her. Now I knew the truth. She'd been living well off my father's death benefits. That realization only deepened my hatred for Luke. The official was still examining everyone's documents carefully. No one noticed how his frown was deepening. Seeing my tense expression, Susan burst into laughter, doubled over with joy. Luke kept glancing at me from the corner of his eye, a warning in his stare, "Don't make trouble." At the same time, a crowd of reporters had gathered outside the factory gates. Susan and Luke elbowed their way to the front. Susan tossed her shiny black hair and forced a strong, dignified smile at the cameras. "Hello, everyone. I'm the daughter of John Liang, the war martyr." The crowd gasped. "John Liang? The one who killed more than a dozen Japanese soldiers in battle? The hero who rushed toward a Japanese tank carrying explosives in his arms. Incredible. You're the daughter of that hero." Amid the crowd's admiring gasps, Susan forced out a tear. "Since I was a child, I dreamed of coming to the city to see where my father lived and to follow in his footsteps, contributing to the great cause of building our country." Luke stood beside her, chest puffed out. "That's right. My father's the village chief. He worked tirelessly to help Susan get a place in the factory. When we missed the train, it was because of me and my father reaching out to the army that these children of martyrs could still chase their dreams of building the nation." As he spoke, he shot me a warning glance, as if to say, "If you dare say a word, you'll regret it." The other villagers looked uncomfortable, red-faced, but none of them stepped forward to expose the lie. No one wanted to offend the village chief, not when their own families were still back in the countryside. Mike clenched his fists, shaking with fury. He started to lunge forward but was pulled back by someone beside him. "Have you forgotten your mom's still in the village?" the guy whispered, helpless and aggrieved. Mike stopped cold, like a bucket of ice water had been poured over his head. Luke looked at him with smug satisfaction and let out a cold snort. Just then, a reporter pushed a microphone in front of me. "Hello, are you also a child of a martyr?" I smiled faintly and looked at Susan. She quickly stepped in front of me and pinched my arm hard in a spot no one could see. She wanted all the attention for herself, basking in admiration as the so-called daughter of a martyr. Being a goddess wasn't enough for her. She wanted the real title. Luke leaned in behind her and whispered in my ear, his voice low and threatening. "Don't make trouble, I'll marry you. Once we're settled at the factory, we'll file a marriage application." The reporters were visibly confused by the strange exchange. Susan quickly put on a fake smile. "Sorry about that. My cousin here is just really shy around strangers." Losing interest, the reporters turned away and ignored me. I quietly stepped back into the crowd, watching them with cold amusement. Keep going, I thought. The higher you climb, the harder you fall. Seeing that I stayed quiet, Susan lifted her chin arrogantly and went on spinning her tale into the cameras, painting herself as a brave and determined daughter of a war hero who had grown up in hardship and never backed down. That's when the factory supervisor suddenly stormed out of the building, his face dark with fury. Several stern-faced staff members followed behind him. My heart thrilled. "Here we go. Time for the show to begin." His gaze locked on Susan and Luke. "You two? Come with me to the office." Susan's smile nearly fell apart. She nervously grabbed Luke's hand. He looked shaken too. Luke glanced at me, and I gave him a calm, pleasant smile. That look gave him a bad feeling in the pit of his stomach, but he tried to play it cool. "Sir, is there some kind of misunderstanding? Did someone say something untrue about us? All our documents are legitimate." The supervisor slammed the referral letters down on the ground. "You had the audacity to forge documents and pose as children of a martyr." Susan and Luke's faces went ghost white. The crowd exploded in shock. Reporters started snapping photos wildly. "No, it's not like that." Susan stammered, shaking her head. I am a child of a martyr. I mean, I'm his goddaughter." She was trying to use that false title to slip by once again. Luke was sweating through his shirt but still tried to defend them. "Sir, this is slander." The supervisor cut him off. "The military district has completed their investigation. You and Susan colluded in a fake relationship, abused your connections, and forged your way into the factory. Absolutely disgraceful." At the words military district, Susan's legs gave out. She collapsed to the ground and trembled. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to get into the city." Luke panicked. He whipped his head toward me and shouted, "Lena, you did this. You set us up." I hid behind a reporter, pretending to be frightened. I just couldn't stand by and watch someone suddenly claim to be my father's daughter. Another wave of shock rippled through the crowd. "So you're John Liang's real daughter?" reporters shouted, cameras flashing. "Oh my God, who are these people? These two shameless cheaters should be thrown in jail." At that moment, several police officers entered the scene. "You're under investigation for forging official documents, dishonoring a war hero's legacy, and other serious offenses. You'll need to come with us." Susan finally cracked and burst into loud sobs. "No, it wasn't me. It was Luke. He didn't know." Luke's eyes widened in disbelief as Susan threw all the blame onto him. "Susan, are you insane?" She clenched her teeth, avoiding his gaze. "It was Luke. He forced me. He said he liked me and made me come to the city with him." Her words didn't just shock Luke, they stunned me and our fellow villagers as well. Mike spat on the ground. What a filthy liar. Luke completely broke down. The woman he had loved for 2 lifetimes had just betrayed him in front of everyone. He tried to lunge at her, but the police held him back tightly. "Susan, say that again if you dare." She flinched, shrinking away. "It was you. You forced me." The two of them, who had been all lovey-dovey just moments ago, now looked like they wanted to strangle each other. "You piece of trash! I'll kill you!" Luke roared, straining against the officers. Honestly, if the police hadn't been holding him, I wouldn't have doubted that he really would have done it. As the officers dragged him away, Luke kept yelling, "You can't arrest me. That liar's letter was fake, but mine was real. I'm a martyr's family member. I'm Lena's fiancé." I smiled and shook my head. "Luke, what makes you think I'd ever still want to marry you? You love me, don't you?" he shouted, like he was grasping at his last lifeline. He stumbled toward me desperately. I pushed him away. "That was before. I died once already. Why would I still love you? Our engagement is canceled." The moment I said that, Luke's pupils dilated in shock. The others didn't understand what I meant by died once, but Luke did. So did I. He shook his head violently. No, that's not true. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean for it to happen. He was falling apart, completely unhinged. He knew this was the end. Reporters swarmed in with microphones and cameras. Why did you pretend to be a martyr's child? Is it true you two were having an affair? Why would you shame a national hero like this? Susan was dragged into the police car, still screaming, "Don't arrest me. I don't want to go to jail." Luke looked completely blank, eyes hollow as they shoved him into the squad car. The sound of sirens wailed as they were taken away. The crowd around us broke into applause. A few villagers came over and patted me on the shoulder. But I knew this was only the beginning of their reckoning. It wasn't over yet. Once the storm passed, I and a few of the villagers successfully started our jobs at the textile factory. By day, I worked on the floor. By night, under the yellow glow of a dim lamp, I compiled materials for a formal report. For years, Luke's family had taken my father's death benefits, my land, and my home. To say they raised me was a joke. I had funded their whole household with the money meant for me. Even the village chief's family lived in my house, while they rented out their own for income. I documented it all. Every abuse of power, every property they stole, every wrong. I even included the chief's long history of corruption. 3 months later, the workshop director suddenly called me into his office. When I walked in, I saw an elderly man in uniform sitting at the desk. I recognized him from an old photo in my grandfather's collection. In my past life, this man had once done great favors for both me and Luke. Grandpa Goo. Grandpa Goo was my grandfather's childhood friend and my father's mentor. In my previous life, because of me, he had shown Luke a lot of kindness, helping him rise quickly through the ranks. And the person I'd sent my report to a few months ago was Grandpa Goo. He looked up at me with kind eyes. "Child, I've read everything you sent," Grandpa Goo said. "You've suffered a lot." His voice was heavy with guilt and sorrow. He felt he had let down his childhood friend and the young disciple who had sacrificed his life too soon. My nose tingled with emotion. I shook my head. "Grandpa Goo, I just want justice." He nodded firmly, his eyes welling with tears. "You've done well. I was blind all these years, trusted the wrong people. I thought Luke's family would treat you right. Don't worry, I'll get to the bottom of this and make things right." Thanks to Grandpa Goo's decisive actions, the investigation moved quickly. The truth came out. Luke's family had stolen a martyr's death compensation, illegally seized my land and house, and profited shamelessly off a dead man's legacy. It was all exposed. The village chief was stripped of his position and sentenced to prison. With Grandpa Goo's help, my home, land, and my father's compensation were returned to me. For the first time, the weight in my heart lifted. Decades passed. 90 years later, I had become a well-known industrialist. I was invited back to my village to share my story with the younger generation, to inspire them. The new village chief was a humble, down-to-earth man, and the villagers welcomed me warmly. I spent the day visiting the village. The once dilapidated mud homes had been replaced by neat little townhouses. There was even a big public square where children ran and played, laughing. After the event, the new chief quietly pulled me aside. He seemed hesitant, like he didn't want to ruin the moment, but said, "There's something I feel you should know before leaving." I raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "After Luke and Susan got out of prison, they ended up together," he said carefully. I tilted my head slightly. "Them, huh?" I could hardly even remember their faces. "Are they doing okay?" I asked lightly, as if inquiring about two old acquaintances. The chief let out a sigh. "Luke, he's completely ruined. That bastard stumbles around drunk all day and beats his wife. Whenever he gets drunk, he starts yelling about how he was once a big shot at the factory. Claims even the general had high hopes for him. It's ridiculous." He shook his head. "Susan, well, she's bitter all the time. Screams at Luke constantly. Half a year ago, they got into a fight and she had a miscarriage." The chief shrugged, his face caught somewhere between pity and resignation. I nodded silently. I no longer had anything to say. Once I had hated them with every fiber of my being, but now they couldn't stir the slightest ripple in my heart. Early the next morning, I wandered through the village alone. As I walked toward the western edge of town, I saw two familiar figures, familiar, yet distant. It was Luke and Susan. Luke looked worn down by life, his back hunched, streaks of white in his hair, his clothes yellowed and threadbare. He was a far cry from the ambitious man he had once been. Susan stood in front of him, hands on her hips, hurling insults. Her clothes were rumpled and dirty, her whole appearance disheveled and bitter. Her voice was sharp and shrill. "Oh, what? Regretting things now?" she sneered. "I heard Lena came back and now you're acting weird. Well, it's too late. She wouldn't look twice at you now. Get lost." Luke shoved her away. There was a flash of rage in his eyes, but it quickly faded into helplessness and numb acceptance. "I know I'm not worthy of her," he muttered. "A failure like me deserves to be stuck with someone like you." "You loser," Susan snapped. "No wonder she dumped you." They kept throwing jabs, spitting venom at each other. Neither of them noticed me standing nearby, watching in silence. I don't know how long I stood there, until Luke suddenly looked up. Our eyes met, and he froze in place. Susan followed his gaze, and the color drained from her face. She stumbled backward. "Lena," Luke murmured my name. I didn't answer. I turned to leave. But Susan gritted her teeth and ran after me, her eyes burning with resentment and humiliation. "Are you happy now? You ruined my whole life. All of it was because of you." "No," I said, turning back calmly. "You destroyed yourself, with your greed and selfishness." Susan opened her mouth to say more, but Luke yanked her back roughly and shoved her behind him. Luke muttered a few harsh warnings to Susan, then turned his eyes to me. His face was full of regret. "Lena," he said, "I know I was wrong. These past few years have been hell for me. I regret everything so much. Lena, I've divorced Susan. Let's start over. I promise I'll treat you right this time." Before I could even react, Susan slapped Luke hard across the face. Luke struck back without hesitation. His hand landed squarely on her cheek, sending her crashing to the ground. A rush of dark, glaring blood pooled beneath her. She'd miscarried. My eyes widened. I ran to get help. As I turned to leave, Luke acted like nothing had happened. He even kicked Susan again as she lay curled on the ground, cursing as he did. "So what if the bastard's gone?" he spat. "Why the hell are you crying? You think I didn't know? Every time we were out of rice, you crawled into that old man's bed at the edge of the village. That kid was never mine." Behind me, I could still hear Susan's shrill cries mixing with Luke's foul curses. Their voices echoed across the empty west end of the village, sharp and jarring. Once the village chief and his people arrived, I quietly walked away. Later, I heard that Susan had lost the child. When the old widower at the edge of the village, apparently the man Susan had been involved with, found out, he broke down sobbing and even got into a brutal fight with Luke. They went at each other with real hatred. Especially Luke. Years of drinking and refusing to work had left him weak. He couldn't even beat the old man. In the end, he was beaten so badly that he lost the one thing that made him a man. Back home, I sat in the courtyard, staring blankly at the book in my hands. The hatred and pain I once carried had long since faded. Watching the misery Luke and Susan lived in now stirred no sympathy in me. They had made their own choices and created their own destruction. I had climbed out of that dark place with my own strength, step by step. Ahead of me was a bright, open future. A gentle breeze swept past, as if my grandfather and the others were answering me from afar. I stood, tears sliding down my cheeks, my heart at peace at last.